Hello, and welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast. I'm Callum.
What on earth is that voice?
Should it? Wow. Oh, it'll be revealed later in the episode.
Is that a teaser for something?
It is a teaser for something, but it's Scooby-Doo. Is it exactly what it is?
All the consonants have to be R's, though.
They do. Waggy. No, R's have to be W's.
R's are W's.
Waggy.
And S's.
Well, give me a whoopie whack.
I think this impression is crumbling a little bit.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Well, oh, no. Oh, will be revealed later anyway. Welcome to the Untitled Film Podcast with Callum and Johnny. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Callum.
This week we're going to talk about a TV series and a movie.
Indeed we are, and it's sort of a touch on what we did last week, because last week we talked about some documentaries that were true crime, and now we're going to be talking about some adaptations of true crime.
We absolutely are, with varying levels of what's the word?
Quality,
Success.
Accomplishment.
But anyway, we will talk more about that in a little bit. But first off, we're going to talk about social media. Where, Callum, can people converse with us in social media form?
On Facebook or Instagram, it's Untitled Film Podcast, one word. And we do now have a YouTube channel. So, if you want to send videos to people, that's where, you can direct them. And we'll be putting stuff up there soon, probably fun little bits, as well as our podcast in video form.
We also appreciate likes on there, subscribes, as you say, sharing with other people, and comments. Comments are always good fun, as long as they are positive. If they're negative, I'll probably still
There's nothing
interact
much
with
we
it.
can really do about that.
But anyway. But yeah, and one of the fun parts of the socials is that we can interact with our audience. And this week we had one of our audience / someone who's previously been on the show messaging us. What were they messaging us about?
They messaged us about the movie,
Use
The
your
Menu.
words.
They had some opinions.
Yeah, so after listening to our review, they had some thoughts. So I thought what we would do is maybe read out those thoughts. Callum is going to play himself.
I am.
And I'm going to go and play Mr. Dogbrain Video. And as you know, he sounds like Scooby-Doo. So that's what the bit at the start of the show is about. Now all is revealed.
Now it's genius. Now you're probably kicking yourself for turning off already.
So give us a little cliff note of what kind of started the conversation. What happened?
So he mentioned that he'd seen The Menu, and I said that, I was a bit more mixed on it, and Johnny liked it a little bit more, and I'm just wondering...
Well, I wouldn't say I loved it. I think I gave it 5 or 6.
A little bit more,
Yeah.
And I was a little bit more negative. And I asked him, what side did you fall on, me or Johnny? And he said, he fell onto my side, and he thought it was, he had some mildly complimentary things to say, but it was more in the negative.
I think the gist of it, up until this part of the conversation, was that he thought it was quite a good cast, but outside of that, didn't think a huge amount of it.
He liked the acting. He didn't think much of the execution.
And so what he said was, I think if you took away everybody in it and replaced them with well aims, it would be a Warty Wicks real on Rotten Tomatoes.
Agreed. It's probably the weakest of the kill the rich satires, with nothing really interesting to say.
Yeah, I thought that many times. Just rough them. Rough them now.
Lol, yeah. He's an old guy. Just punch him.
The best twist was the girl being a pussy. But the ending was so silly, and with the suicide and marshmallows. You just wouldn't let that happen to Roo.
And then I said, yeah, I like that, and I thought, but then that's where this message cuts off.
What did you think? What did you like the marshmallows then?
I quite liked it. I mean, nothing in the film I disliked. I just was frustrated by the fact that it didn't go in harder. So there was nothing in the film that I thought, that's bad. I liked individual things, and the ending I did quite appreciate seeing them all go up in flames.
I mean, I kind of agree with his overall point. If you took out the good actors and replaced them with not so good actors, then it would have been a worse film. But I think you can say that about any film, realistically.
There's a lot of films you can say that
And there's
about,
a lot of films that have a middle at best script that have got, one or two good performances that elevate them to a higher level.
And sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, and I would argue that to an extent, Mr. Fiennes did that, but yeah, it's not a masterpiece by any stretch of imagination. But I think it's a good Sunday afternoon watch.
Taco Tuesday. There's something about his delivery there.
Yeah, my favourite one was where did you go to school? Student loans. No, you're gonna die. And I was like, yeah, fair play. I thought that was probably the funniest line in the film.
It probably was.
But yeah,
it's a good one.
I thought, as I said before, I think it hit the five laughs. Probably was more successful at being a kind of weird comedy thriller thing than one of the films we're going to talk about today. Anyway, on from that, the next segment we tend to talk about is
the news.
Indeed, and before I'm going to turn it down.
Okay, sorry. I'll be good.
Yeah. News. Would you like to go first, Mr.
Sure.
Sires?
So it's recently been announced that the BAFTA nominations have come out. And the big nominee is not Everything Everywhere All at Once, nor is it The Banshees of Inisherin. It's All Quiet on the Western Front. Because the BAFTAs like to go a little bit quirky. They've given that 14 nominations, where both Everything Everywhere All at Once and Banshees have tied with 10. So it's interesting to see where their favours lie.
Yeah, I heard lots of good things about it, but I haven't actually watched it yet. I think maybe I'm First World War'd out. There's been 1917 and various other bits and pieces of late.
I think films about trench warfare, I get the same thing. I just recently rewatched Band of Brothers, and while, of course, that's excellent, it is exhausting watching that pain and suffering and death and explosions and bombs and gunfire. It is a lot to take.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And yeah, but I'll probably watch it at some point. I do hear good things about it. But it's kind of interesting one because, like you say, it is a bit of a quirky one because it's kind of been under the radar. Kind of get Everything Everywhere All at Once, not getting it because it's the BAFTAs, but you'd have thought that Banshees would have been a bit higher up in the rankings.
Given that it's a favourite of theirs. And they always have a nomination for an English actor who doesn't really get a look in anywhere else. And this time it's the film with Emma Thompson. It's All Good Leo Grand, the film where she hires a younger male escort because she never felt any sort of sexual pleasure when she was younger.
Oh, I did see a trailer of that.
It was supposed to be I never saw it, but she's supposed to be very good in it. And actually, so is the young man that plays Leo Grand. He also got a nomination. So, and I've seen him in other things. He's a talented young man. So a BAFTA nomination isn't going to go amiss for him.
Yeah, fair enough. No, they're weird one, the BAFTAs. They very much the opposite of whatever a litmus test for the Oscars is. Like, they never line up in any way, shape or form. Obviously, they tend to be biased towards British films normally. But I
think especially recently, because they changed their voting, and now they kind of just go for whatever they want. Because they did try to be the little brother or the little sister to the Oscars, and it just wasn't bringing in the viewership. I think that's that they realized, well, what are we getting out of this by kind of kowtowing to the Oscars? Let's just do our own thing.
Yeah, and exactly, and I think they play well in the UK because there's a big section of the film audience in the UK love British films as they love British TV, and it's just my issue with British cinema, and there's some brilliant films out there, is they tend to either be comedies, and most of the time fairly cookie-cutter comedies. They tend to be First and Second World War movies because we apparently won them. And because of that, people seem to be obsessed with it still because that was the old glory days. We do have a certain
amount of things that we like to talk about.
Or it tends to be films about old people retiring or old people remembering that they can do a thing that they used to do. Or
well, it's like Bill Nye in Living, which is actually a remake of a Japanese film.
Oh, interesting.
Akira Kurosawa film.
But they... and also kind of spy movies because we all were obsessed by James Bond and Jean Le Carré. So we seem to have to make lots of spy movies. That is basically the majority of British cinema these days, with the occasional gangster movie.
Pretty much.
So that's my issue with British cinema, but there we go.
At least we've got rid of Guy Ritchie. He's in Hollywood now.
Yeah, and they can keep him along with James Corden. Anyway, so my first piece of news, something we were, I think, talking about a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember which episode, but Tron, which I thought was dead in the water.
I got this as well, so we're going to have a big conversation about it.
It's back.
It is back.
Yeah, obviously we all thought it was very much dead. We thought that Disney had got, I don't know, 6,000 other franchises that they were making lots of money from, and the film that they spent quite a lot of money on and probably just about scraped even was not one coming back. I mean, what's next? I mean, I love Tron, but Daft Punk have broken up, so I don't know who's going to do the soundtrack of the next one, so that slightly concerns me.
The director's not coming back.
The director's not coming back, which also slightly concerns me because I think it must have been the Top Gun episode, maybe, because
probably
Top
was.
Gun's director. And they've cast Gerard Leto. I fucking hate Gerard Leto. Apart from a few thin roles here and there where his crazy overacting kind of hit the right note, like they say, a broken clock's correct twice a day.
When he was a young man, he was excellent.
Yeah.
Like Fight Club and
Requiem for a Dream.
Requiem for a Dream. But yeah, he just does these.
Even Dallas Buyers
movies.
Club, he's very good in. But recently, it's just been shock after shock. And even when I'm watching, like, I love Blade Runner 2049. It's one of my favourite sci-fis of the last 10 years. But his character is just really annoying. He's like the worst character, and he doesn't feel like, he kind of does feel like he should be in the film, but also doesn't. Like, as
There's
BoJack
something
Horseman,
incredibly inorganic about him.
yeah, he just tries too hard. He tries too hard. As BoJack Horseman would say, he is the honeydew melon of people. Anyway, but yeah, what are your thoughts on Tron coming back?
I mean, pretty much the same as yours. Not very good. There's some trepidation there. And also the director, they've got I think his name is Joachim something. His last name is Joachim Ronning, who directed the 4th or 5th Pirates of the Caribbean movie, the one that nobody likes.
Oh, okay.
And Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, the one that nobody really liked or talk about.
I've never heard of it.
The second Maleficent film.
Didn't know there was a second Maleficent film.
Well, there you go. That tells you all you need to know. He's the guy that has directed 2 sequels that people are like, oh, yeah, I can leave that.
So this is a question: is Jeff coming back?
Well, none of the articles I've read have mentioned him.
I feel like, because obviously, I mean, it's not too much of a spoiler here, but in case you haven't seen Tron Legacy and you're planning on seeing it, fairly early on in it, Cillian Murphy is a character, and you would just assume that the fact that Cillian Murphy's got like a 5-minute role in it means he was going to be a big thing in the next one. And that's kind of what I expected. And obviously, Olivia Wilde now a massive actress, and I quite like the main guy who I always forget his name.
Garrett Hedlund, I believe.
Yeah, I quite like him. So I kind of feel like it was set up they could do something interesting with them, and then bring in Cillian Murphy, and it's like, I mean, Jared Leto is a big step down from Cillian Murphy as an acting point of view.
Reminds me, do you remember Pacific Rim 2?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Several years after the fact. So all the things they set up in the first film,
they kind of
all the
just given up with.
they kind of scrapped, and they brought back a few characters, but most of them, except for the 2 scientists, were cameos. So you got Rinko Kikuchi back to play a cameo, only for her to be unceremoniously killed off screen.
Yeah, I mean, I was in China when it came out, and I watched it in China, and I've never seen a film that is a bigger money grab aimed at China. Like every single beer, there was like Chippendales beer, Geely car. It was like everything Chinese, every Chinese brand was just in there. The rest of the world, like, okay, if you go to a Chinese restaurant, you might get Chippendales, but it's not like a big thing. You're not going to go into a pub and they've got Chippendales on tap. And it was quite clear, and I think Tencent paid for the majority of it. Who, for those that know, massive Chinese company, but they also have a massive cinema arm, and you'll see it a lot with like Transformers 17, and their logo will flash up at the start of the film because they funded half of it, because obviously those films make bank in China.
I do remember there's a scene where a Transformer crashes into a a truck, I believe, with Chippendale beer, and Mark Wahlberg cracks one open and pours it on one of the bad guys. Hey, you like that? You like that? You need to get some beer on you. It probably won't be the last time you hear the Mark Wahlberg impression today.
No. Hint, hint for what's coming up later. So does this mean you haven't got a second piece of news?
I don't have one, because that was going to be my second piece of news.
Well, I will tell you my second piece of news, which is James Gunn thinks his Guardians cast could join him at DC, which is a weird one. I mean, yeah, let's just steal the whole cast from a movie, come to a rival studio.
He is one of those directors who likes reusing people, so there's probably going to be some Nathan Fillion cameos in his upcoming DC films. Pretty much most of the Guardians team, except for Dave Bautista, well, the main three, showed up in the Suicide Squad in tiny blinking missing roles. So that doesn't shock me. He's that kind of director.
I find it interesting though that he, might take over Gamora and Star-Lord like that. I feel like they will surely. Marvel will roll out the money truck and try and keep them. I know Dave Bautista said he's not coming back.
Yeah, well, he's getting on in years, and the makeup.
He said he wants to do other things.
He wants to do other things, and as an actor, he's getting more interesting than just sort of barking jokes like what wrestlers usually do when they're in movies, is screech at the screen like barking threats and stuff. I think he's getting beyond that.
Dave Bautista is a genuinely really good actor.
Good.
Like, The Rock is obviously very bankable and very likable, but from a pure acting point of view, I don't think there's a better not WWE. Obviously, Mickey Rourke's quite a good actor as well. But
yes, and there's some old timey English wrestlers who went into acting, but that's a whole different.
That's a different kettle of fish. But yeah, of kind of that WWE ilk. Like John Cena's very funny. He actually has very good comic timing, but he's not got a wide range. He's either comic or he's action, and there's not much else. But
pretty much
Batista,
two speeds.
Yeah. But Batista, there is a range there with that man.
Yeah, totally. I mean, most recently seen in the Knives Out sequel, he was very funny in that.
He was very funny in that. Yeah, absolutely. But he's also incredibly good in Blade Runner 2049.
Very subtle.
Very subtle. Yeah, there's loads of things. I quite liked him as Oddjob in James Bond. He was far more subtle than the original Oddjob.
And we're going to be seeing him soon in the film we talked about fairly recently, M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin.
Yeah, which he also looks quite subtle in and very
threatening, very...
Threatening, but also kind of like a chilled threatening.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So no, absolutely. It's but it's an interesting one. I just thought also, would you leave that kind of perfection studio that is Marvel? I'm not saying that Marvel movies are perfect.
But I know what you mean. Perfection as in...
money.
They pump out a film, it will probably make at least $750 million.
Like, the only one I can think of that's truly flopped recently is Eternals.
Yeah, it did.
But other than that, none of them have flopped, have they? They've all either made their budget back, plus even now they've got down to the Z-list superheroes.
Yeah, well, if they can make an Ant-Man film that makes $600 or $700 million, I think they're doing pretty well.
If only they just left Edgar Wright in there, I reckon it can make another couple of hundred.
Yeah.
But there we go. I think no point crying over that spilled milk.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's gone.
Unfortunately. But anyway, with those pieces of news, I think we need to move on to the matter at hand. So what are we going to be talking about this week?
Well, we're going to start with talking about the miniseries Welcome to Chippendales, and we're going to chase that with Michel Bay's Pain and Gain.
Wow.
And they're both connected by the fact that they're dramatized, tellings of true crime stories.
Absolutely. So I'll do the honours with Welcome to Chippendales.
Okie dokie, go for it.
So for those that don't know, Chippendales is a dancing men's troupe. Well, it's not. I suppose they are a troupe now because they travel around and do world tours, is the majority of it, / being in Vegas. But they were started off, it was basically the first kind of big American male strippers that were targeted for women particularly. And it basically opened up in a club in LA with a guy he was an immigrant from India, kind of worked his way up and saved and saved and saved, and wanted to open a high class club, basically that was for. It's not backgammon, is it? Whatever game it was. Anyway, wanted to play for some. Was it? It wasn't checkers. What was the game?
I think it was backgammon.
Was it backgammon? It might have been backgammon then. But yeah, anyway, for a kind of like a high class gambling club. So he bought some old rundown nightclub and turned it into a backgammon club, let's say, and it wasn't successful. So he then joined up with another guy who was what's the word? Questionable, but they together tried lots and lots of things. They had women's mud wrestling and various other shady things, and eventually found the idea of having male strippers. Got a load of male strippers in there, and no one had really ever catered to that before, and it was incredibly successful very quickly. After a little while, though, they realised that it was just a bit seedy. It wasn't that quality. He still had this idea to have something that was maybe a little bit better quality and something that other people couldn't just come along and copy, because anyone could have some dancing men. And in comes basically a television choreographer who he hired to choreograph the dancers, to make it a bit more interesting, to make people want to come back week after week and see different things. And eventually, they kind of realised that symbiotically they can't live without each other. One was the money man, one was the I had to say visionary, because he wasn't the person who came up with the idea, but one was the creative. And they kind of fell into a business relationship with each other, which fairly quickly, as often these things do with egos and money is concerned, it falls slightly foul of some impropriety, shall we say. Yeah, that's my summing up. What did you think?
Well, I think with any true crime retelling, a dramatization of a true crime retelling, you always have to ask yourself, would it have been better use of my time to watch a documentary instead, of which I'm sure there's several, of any of these stories?
There's actually a very good one that came out a couple of years ago on Amazon, because I'd never heard of it before, and then I watched the thing on Amazon, and then this came out, and I was like, oh, interesting.
And so the TV show, the retelling, has to have something interesting about it, whether it's just acting or some sort of spark, some sort of something that makes it cinematic to make it worth your time. And I think, well, it's not absolutely perfect. Welcome to Chippendales is very much a good use of your time. It does skip around the events, because like any of these things, it has to crunch down several years into 8 episodes, and it has to show the rise and fall of these people and what happened to them and the darker side of the story, and it has to crunch them into events that wouldn't have happened. It has to make conveniences. It has to make use dramatic license, but so long as it doesn't feel like it's wasting your time, which I think is a slight hint for the next film. If it doesn't feel like it's wasting your time, then it's at least somewhat worth it, even if it's not a stone cold 10 out of 10 classic. And I think here what you have is that it very much focuses on the story of the two men, the two men who, as you say, one was the creative, one was the money, and they're both very well played. I didn't know the other actor. Of course, a lot of people will know Kumail Nanjiani. He's been very successful. Silicon Valley, The Big Sick, The Eternals, lots of things, and he's been very well known as Community. He's a very well known comedy actor, but he really is striking out at the moment with more dramatic performances. He has been for the last few years, and there's something about him. He's both confident and awkward. And there's
which is what he seems like in real life as well.
Yeah, in interviews, if you watch him, he has a similar quality. But it's something. It's that contradiction in his body, in his because he had to gain a lot of muscle for the Marvel movie recently. So he does look very boxy in his suits. But it's sort of like he wants to present himself a certain way. It really lends him some credence to this character, who is that kind of guy. He's very awkward in his skin, but when he gets a certain amount of money, when it gets to a certain amount of success, he wants to show it off. He has his tailor kind of move the cuffs of his sleeves up to a ridiculous level where it would look really silly, just so he can show off the magnificent watch that he has. And I think that's really the hook of the series, because this does fall into some convenient areas. It falls into some expected areas. Like if you've watched enough dramatic retellings of crime stories, you're going to find yourself hitting the same beats. And I think that it doesn't avoid them. In fact, it falls pretty much into the same traps as they come and go. At least it does it in an entertaining and presentable sort of package. So you're never bored watching it. And you always think, well, I could be watching a documentary, but this is fun too. And I think that shows it as something that is very good, not a classic, but certainly worthwhile of your time. And Johnny, what did you think of it?
So I think that it was incredibly well acted. I think big props to Kamal. I like to see him be successful in anything he does, because I used to listen to the majority of Harmontown podcasts, and he used to quite often pop up in those, and so I just really like him from all that time back. And I thought he was excellent. I thought he played that role incredibly well. I also thought that the rest of the cast was really good. I thought Murray Bartlett as Nick DeNoyer
he was excellent. Yeah, I was unfamiliar with him.
He was perfect. Like absolute masterpiece. Juliette Lewis, always good fun, and she was perfect, playing exactly the right kind of character she should be playing. So yeah, just the whole kind of like lead cast was excellent. I thought it did a pretty good nuts and bolts job of telling the story. I thought it started to come unstuck towards the ending a little bit. I don't know if I feel like they didn't know how to land the ending. And I also kind of thought it fell into the Magic Mike kind of trap a little bit of where actually, well, we could get some more women to watch this if we have a little bit more naked men dancing, which, it's no kind of, I suppose in a lot of ways it's not a criticism. A lot of shows do that with women as well, thinking, oh yeah, if men watch it, we put more women in. But actually I thought it could have been 2 episodes shorter. It's 8 episodes long, and I thought you could have done 6 episodes and then stuck the landing better. And I kind of almost think, did they not stick the landing because they were trying to make more time of when the club was open and were, the more good fun times. So that's probably my biggest criticism. I think it's a bit uneven in places, but I enjoyed the staging. I enjoyed I really enjoyed the acting, and I really enjoyed the characters, and I thought it did a very good job of kind of fleshing out their relationships and their motives, which these things don't always do.
I think one big benefit is that it's written and it's created by Robert Siegel, and if you know that name, it's because he's also the creator of Pam and Tommy, and also the founder, the film about the creation of McDonald's. So if anyone's an expert at turning messy true life stories into a slick, presentable, if not necessarily a classic, this story really happened, here's the true events, he's probably the guy to do it. It is very slick. It's very controlled slickness, and for the most part, it lands it. One interesting thing I read up on the lives of the people, the real life people, and the wife of the main guy, of the Indian guy, it's not really much known about her. In fact, there's almost nothing known about her. So pretty much anything you see in this show is complete fiction, just because they don't know. That's
interesting, because
what she's like.
The documentary that I watched and the things that I read said that she didn't really. This spoiler alert, but obviously there's a murder that happens. After the murder happens in the film, she kind of works out what happened and disowns him, really. And I don't know if she does divorce him, but disowns him. And in real life, apparently that very much didn't happen. Apparently she kind of quite defended him and said that he kind of was just misunderstood and that actually wasn't a bad guy. And yeah, it's quite a different story.
Different takes on it.
But no, I think obviously there's always a certain level of creative license with these things. I think what this did better than some of the other ones that have come up more recently, like Dharma. I actually didn't mind Dharma. I thought it was a good central performance, but obviously people said it was quite a bit exploitative, and I kind of can see where they might say that from. And they also didn't really, I didn't think did a very good job of looking at the psychology behind it and stuff. Whereas I think this actually fleshed out that Steve Banerjee's kind of main background. He, what's the word I'm looking for? It all, he had kind of, what's the word? Like he kind of deep-seated insecurities as a person.
He was incredibly insecure.
Yeah, and those insecurities were what kind of, made him lash out and made him have this level of... And I thought it kind of did quite a good job of explaining. It wasn't a perfect job, but I thought it did quite a good job of explaining.
It certainly
and the same with
across the story about someone who was creating his own rope.
Yeah, well... and also the same with Nick Denoyer and kind of, him being closeted and kind of, the story behind that and how that kind of, I suppose pushed him in a way to, want to break out and succeed on him by himself and, have some money and things behind him. So I think that stuff, it did quite a good job. I just thought the ending was a bit messy. I didn't think it kind of jumped, it was like a skip into the future too far. I don't think it really explained that last bit very well.
Yeah, the final two episodes and also I think the dynamic was gone a little bit, but of course I can't really mention it without spoiling it.
Yeah, exactly. But no, it was definitely a good... I was going to say good stab at it. Not the easiest stab, but I feel like for merge, I think that sounds a bit weird. But no, it was definitely it was definitely well done. It was definitely incredibly well acted, and I would say definitely watch it.
Yes, I'd agree. A definite recommend from me.
Perfect. And on that, let's stop for a commercial break. Hello and welcome back from the commercial break.
Well, I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah, hopefully they heard an advert. I've noticed at the minute that not all episodes in January, not just of our podcast, of some very big podcasts out there actually, don't seem to have mid-roll adverts at the minute because January, for anyone who knows anything about like YouTube or digital marketing, no one wants to advertise in January because everyone spent all the money at Christmas, so it's a stupid time to advertise. So you don't tend to get that many adverts this time of year. But hopefully by the time you listen to this, which will be in February, that lovely advert will be back and you don't just hear that Acast noise that you hear in the middle of all podcasts. It goes...
Yes, that would be, and it would embarrass us less for when we do the whole. Yeah, I'd buy that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a product I sure want to get.
Absolutely. Anyway, that's a little peek behind the curtain. Not that we actually make any money from this podcast, but if you can share it with everyone, maybe in the future, one day we will. Maybe we'll have enough money to buy a beer for ourselves and for Mr. Robert Hardstone.
Yes, that would be really nice if we could just do that.
And the day we're recording this, although it would be very late by the time it comes out, it is Mr. Robert Hardstone's birthday. So a little happy birthday to
birthday,
him.
Rob.
You'll hear this probably in like a week's time when you're editing it. So it'll only be very late. Anyway, on to the second movie, which is Pain and Gain by Mr. Michael Bay. And some people would describe the first word as having to watch this film, but we'll go into that into more detail in a bit. But Callum, would you like to give us a bit of a summary of this movie?
Sure. So Pain and Gain is set in Miami, Florida, and it's in the, I believe it's the mid-90s. It's about some knuckle-headed, just the dumbest of these trio of criminals. They're bodybuilders, and not just kind of regular bodybuilders, but they're the kind of guys that are absolutely jacked. And the lead guy, played by Mark Wahlberg, he has this sort of self-starting motivation. He keeps on talking about the American dream and, I'm going to rise to the top. He's very incredibly narcissistic. And at one point, he comes up with this plan because he is a fitness coach at a gym, and he keeps on saying things like, "I'm going to turn this gym around. I'm going to get it 3 times the memberships. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that." And he does have at least an initial charm, so he is able to get these kind of at least these initial goals done. Gets the gym to have its membership increase quite a lot and get clients that he wants to see there. And at one point, he gets a client played by Tony Shalhoub, who is a very rich man, and he can't stop bragging about how much money he has. He keeps on talking about, the money I made from this industry and that industry. So this knucklehead, along with his bodybuilding friend, played by Anthony Mackie, decides, well, we're going to kidnap him and we're going to steal the money that he has in these offshore accounts, but they need a third person. And there's a third bodybuilder who wants to go straight. He's had some time in jail. He has these anger management issues, and he's played by The Rock. And he's a Christian. He's a teetotaler. And they're able to manipulate him very quickly, saying things like, let's get a drink. I don't drink. Good for you, brother. It's just an expression, though. It just means let's hang out. And the 3 idiots concoct their plan, and we'll see if they're successful with it. So, Johnny, before I say anything about Pain and Gain, I know that at the time of recording, when I came into your house to record this, you had the last 5 minutes still playing. So clearly you were really eager to watch it ahead of time. So what did you think of it?
Well, I had seen it before, a very, very long time ago, probably a couple of years after it first came out. And what can you say about Michael Bay trying to do an art house movie? It's not very good for a start. Where do I start on this? It's pretty abhorrent in some ways. It's kind of quite racist and stereotypy from its characterizations of people. It's incredibly misogynistic. It's homophobic at times. Now, obviously, you're not meant. Well, and this is the bigger question. Pretty much every single person, apart from Ed Harris playing a retired cop who is fairly likable, every single person in this film is incredibly unlikable, and in real life they would be horrible, horrible people. And they say horrible, horrible things, which then begs the question, who are you meant to be rooting for? And my guess is it's meant to be kind of an anti-hero. Bearing in mind as well, they've also got Anthony Mackie, The Rock, and Mark Wahlberg, all but one of whom are fairly likeable in real life. You can decide which one I think is unlikable. Probably the one that blinded a guy. They are not likeable. So straight away, the wheels come off that wagon. And then it makes you question, well, if they're meant to be likeable and they're saying all these horrible things, do these the things that the director kind of believes in? So that's one massive problem I have with it, just from a moral point of view. It's fucking awfully directed. It's really ugly. Like, it's so badly shot.
Ugly.
It's so horrendously annoying. Like, just fucking don't stop with the Dutch angles and stop moving the cameras back. And why are you constantly, when people are having a conversation, doing like these hero angles and moving the camera around them? And then why, when there's even the slightest bit of action, do you cut to like these GoPros that were from the first generation of GoPros that looked like they were shot on a really terrible phone, but just for like tiny shots for a couple of seconds? Like, you realised your mistake, but you thought, fuck it, I've recorded it, I'll put it in anyway. It doesn't make sense. It starts off with the Mark Wahlberg character doing one of those, yeah, that's me, I bet you're wondering how I got here kind of moments. Like, so the script and the story is told in such an appalling way, but then it cuts between another character kind of doing one of those, I bet you're wondering how I got here too kind of moment.
And then it happens about 8 more times.
I know, and it's just like, tell a story. And then it doesn't understand anything. Like, it's really thick. So there's a really good example in the script at the end. You've got the one likable character who, if you were going to tell it from someone's point of view, I would have told it from the Ed Harris character's point of view, because he's the only likable person in there. Because the victims, neither of whom are particularly likable, so you don't really care that they're dead. Ends with him saying, it's just the small things in life that are important, while it pulls away from him sitting on the end of this dock on this beautiful house he owns on the Miami waterfront, which must be worth, I don't know the cost of Miami property, but I suspect it's like $5, $10, $15 million. So yeah, that's really the simple life. It's not him sitting in the field eating a strawberry or something. It's him sitting on his multi-million-pound house dock, which, by the way, how as an ex-cop got that as well? Is he that good a PI? Nothing about this film makes sense. It's ugly. It's really poorly put together. It's misogynistic. I suppose the only thing I can say is it's probably one of the more chilled out Michael Bay movies from how it's shot, which
I guess that's only because it's the only one that doesn't have an explosion.
Well, exactly. Well, it has one or two,
but not to the extent of a Transformers.
No, obviously not. And there's not as much shaky cam, which is a positive, I suppose.
It's a weird film because, like you say, it has those 5 or 6 different shifting narrative points.
Yeah.
And you kind of think, well, maybe they're trying to do something like Fargo or something. You can tell that in their minds.
Couldn't get any further away from Fargo if you try.
Yeah,
from
exactly.
a quality point of view.
In their minds, they think they're doing all these very clever things. I think they think they're being really clever, and I think they think that they're hitting all these satirical points, like the bit where he says it's the simple things, and it pulls out to a big mansion. Well, maybe in screenwriting language, they kind of slap themselves on the back, go, that's really funny, a bit of irony there. But
it doesn't seem that way, though.
Good. It's just like, if it is, it doesn't come across. And if it isn't, it's just boneheaded. Yeah. And it's the problem that I said earlier, like with any retelling of a true crime story, would I prefer to just be watching an episode of Deadline? And this, for an hour on Deadline, here's the story of 3 bodybuilders. That would have been great. I would have really liked that.
But I would argue he's even not. It is true crime in the shortest sense, but he's trying to make a comedy. He's trying to be a dark comedy.
He's trying to make a dark comedy.
But it's not funny. It's not satirical. In what way is it satirical?
I think he's trying to, having speeches about my American dream is bigger than yours. I think he's trying to. I think he thinks he's being really clever here.
But I also kind of think Michael Bay probably believes them and sides with them a bit, and I think that's where. I just don't think that Michael Bay has a satirical bone in his body.
I think you're right. I think he's too dull of a person, and I agree with pretty much everything you said. But you said that it wasn't funny. And boy, howdy, is it not funny. Like, the kind of awkward lurches to improvised comedy. Like, there's a scene where Anthony Mackie, because he takes so many steroids, he doesn't get erections anymore. He goes to see a doctor, and the nurse is kind of flirting with him, and they end up getting married. And he says, oh, my nuts don't work. Oh, but they're more like raisins. And she says, oh, well, maybe they're chocolate raisins. And that's just gross. And it's such the sensibility of Michael Bay talking about testicles and chocolate-covered testicles and racist, gross humour.
There's also like pissing jokes, shit jokes. There's again all the things that Michael Bay loves. I remember a robot pissing in a Transformers movie, and it's like children's humour.
Yes,
he's a churlish man. Oh, what the other thing is, he's done what Michael Bay does, is he doesn't understand quality or writing a good script or pacing or acting or anything that you're meant to do in a movie. But what he does is he opens the checkbook and goes, oh, this is meant to be a comedy, and we want some like improvised comedy scenes. Let's get the checkbook out and we'll get in Rebel Wilson and we'll get in Ken Jeong. And we'll get in a few
and the guy
comedy
that plays
people.
The boss in the gym.
Yeah, he's bound down and stuff, isn't he?
He's in a bunch of comedies.
We'll get some comedians, and
then you have.
we need to have good actors for a bit.
Maury Chowkin. Tony Shalhoub and Ed Harris.
That's
actors.
And people, even though this is meant to be my attempt at a art house film, we still need to get some people in bums on seats. So we'll get The Rock and we'll get Mark Wahlberg, Anthony Mackie wasn't obviously that big at the time, but we'll get those checkbooks out. So it's like, he's like a collector of things that doesn't know what to do with the things once he's collected
like
them.
Island of misfit toys.
Yeah, like the movie The Island.
I actually thought The Rock was trying.
Yeah,
and
I would say that. I actually think they all were.
I think every so often The Rock kind of tries to give a shit, like once every 5 years or so. And the scenes where he's kind of totally wasted because after they commit their crime and steal this money, he falls off the wagon hard. He becomes a real druggie. And some of his stumbling around is quite funny considering just how big he is. It creates some fairly okay slapstick comedy. It's not nearly enough. But I was surprised by how much I liked him in it.
I just, in general, honestly think that the majority of the actors in it were going, oh, yeah, no, this is, they're trying to do a smart movie here. This is going to be satirically funny. And when you're on set, maybe it seemed, in isolation, maybe all these bits seem that way. And, oh, yeah, no, he's going to... But again, it's not edited together properly. The script doesn't hang together. Maybe when they read the script at first, like you say, it came across as quite good. But Michael Bay just doesn't know how to direct anything. He doesn't. Everything's just it's lurid. It's not comic. Do you know what I mean? Somehow it's hard to describe without having seen it. But when something's meant to be funny,
everything looks gross.
It looks
sticky.
It looks like you remember. There's that video for that song "Call on Me." No, is it the "Call on Me" one? There was some dance song, but push me and then just touch, and everything's like it's all jiggling women, and that's meant for 2 minutes or 3 minutes of doing that. It's kind of meant to be a bit ironic and a bit comedy. It's not really. It's a bit lurid, but it's a 3-minute music video, and it's like he's done that. It's like he's seen that and gone, yeah, if we had a whole film of this, that's really satirical. Yeah, it's really funny, but actually, it's also like just barely naked women and barely naked hunky men. So people will go and see that as well. And I don't know if it's a conscious or a subconscious thing, but he just doesn't get it. He doesn't get it. Needs to be. If Terry, going back to last week, if Terry Gilliam shot something like this, it would be like really, I don't know, wide angle fisheye lenses in people's faces and ugly, and it would be like this horrible world, and everyone would have stupid hair. Well, they did have stupid hair and things, but
it certainly wouldn't be.
It would feel disgusting, not creepy. This felt creepy,
rather than just this is how I shoot a film. I've got 20 million. I'm going to do it like this on these kind of really grotty cameras, and it's just going to look gross.
You say 20 million? It was over $60 million the budget, and that was 10 years ago.
Oh my god! The screenwriters are the people I'm most surprised by. The two guys that wrote this are responsible for pretty much the entirety of the MCU. They are the screenwriters behind first two Captain America films, the second Thor movie, Agent Carter, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame. And they've got 4 more projects ahead, and 2 of them, one of them is a Marvel movie, and the other one is a sequel to The Grey Man. And they also are the co-writers behind the Chronicles of Narnia films. Mm-hmm. So there's
actually, you are right. It's a lower budget than I thought. I misread it earlier. It's only just about $25 million.
I thought it was. I thought it was his attempt to do it an art house budget,
which then goes back to kind of like Mark Wahlberg and The Rock kind of reading the script and going, oh, this must be a good film. It's got good people attached. And at which point I go, well, it's solely the domain of Michael Bay that this film has been. I mean, I don't think it was ever going to be The Sting or something, but maybe in the hands of someone who's not a complete moron who should only be able to direct music videos and car adverts. It might have been a tolerable movie.
And the other problem about having 5 or 6 different stories is because you realise quite quickly just how thin of a story this is.
It could have been 90 minutes, this film.
It could have been 90 minutes. It could have been... I mean, it's a real nothing true crime. It feels a lot more to me like a Deadline episode than it does. Even having its own special on Netflix, I would feel is too thin. There just isn't that much material to go around.
No,
and that's why they had to keep changing perspective.
I do think you might have been able to get 90 minutes out of it, but I just remember looking at the clock at 54 minutes in, thinking, well, this is 90% of the story wrapped up. Where do they go from here? And they did go a little bit further, but that was less than halfway into the movie. And I already thought they'd wasted 10 minutes in that 53 minutes. So you could have if you'd have made it a 90-minute movie, there might have been something in there. And if you'd improved the script a bit, and if you'd have got a director who just wasn't lurid and actually kind of made it funnier, and maybe had comic timing and thing, Yeah. The thing is with Michael Bay, when he's doing his I'm not going to stand here and defend him massively because he's just not a very good director, but I thought the first Transformers, for a movie about toys, was tolerable. And I think the original Bad Boys, for what it is fine. And I think The Rock, for what it is fine. And The Island has things that are likable about it, but isn't particularly good. But he's not like flat out awful. But this film, they almost distilled the things he's good at and took them away from him for this film and left him with all the things he's not good at, which is comedy, direction, and pathos.
Yeah, the things that storytelling.
Those are things he does not have, and taste. They're things he doesn't have. If it's a movie about like explosions, if it's Martin Lawrence and Will Smith driving down a hill in a Humvee, then maybe he can do that quite well. But it's if you know what I mean. Like,
no, absolutely. Recently, did you see Ambulance?
No.
It's a remake of I can't remember where in Europe, but of a European film, and the European film is 90 minutes. Kind of fun knockabout action comedy about two thieves that steal an ambulance, and there's a man dying in the back, and there's the ambulance crew trying to save him. So that's a pretty good idea for a comedy. The Michael Bay version, they get into trouble with the cartels. It's 2 hours long. He employs this GoPro guy, drone flyer, like the best drone flyer in the world. Like you said, he hires people. Mm-hmm. So there's certain weird insert shots of a camera climbing a wall for no reason, and then doing a loop-de-loop, and then kind of needling through these tunnels, and go, okay, that's an impressive demo. I'd watch a demo with that. It's ugly in a film, in this 2-hour bloated mess that came from a tightly paced, funny 90-minute European comedy.
I know, yeah. I once saw a interview with Michael Bay where he said his favourite film ever was the original West Side Story. And then they had him, it was like one of those ones that for like Empire or something. And they had him then going over his favourite scene. And he was like, yeah, I love this shot. I love the way the camera does that. I love this. I love that. And it wasn't, I love the camera. It wasn't things like, I love the way the camera does that because it shows this feeling of this character, or it does that. It's because he was like, it's because it looks dynamic. It looks dynamic. It looks dynamic. And that's all he knows. He just thinks that putting dynamic things next to each other, if I get a dynamic comedy actor and a dynamic drone pilot and a dynamic shot where even when they're talking, the camera's spinning around them and spinning around them and spinning around them at a wonky angle, it's going to look dynamic and it's going to look big and it's going to look good and it's going to be great. And if I do someone spitting in slow motion, that'll be funny. And if I do someone pissing themselves in slow motion, that'll be funny. And if I do someone walking out of a bathroom going, sorry, I've shat everywhere, that'll be funny. That
was so horrible.
And it's just, and then, and it, yeah, it just, the things he's good at is not in this film. And he's not good at that many things.
This is the soul of an ugly man, and his soul is bared out. I remember Mark Kermode saying that this is Michael Bay's attempt at an indie movie. So we get to see his soul, and it's as black and as horrible as you expect it to be.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that he seems to not be allowed to make big movies anymore.
It is odd. He's no longer the guy, is he?
No, I don't think the last few Transformers were particularly successful. And I understand that he's incredibly difficult to work with. Like pretty much every actor who's ever worked with him has fallen out with him eventually. Yeah, whether it be on the first film or the second film or the third film. It's not just Megan Fox. There's a lot of actors out there. I don't think Shia LaBeouf's the biggest fan of him these days. Not that Shia LaBeouf is particularly the greatest Joshua character maybe, but I think there's a lot of people out there who just are not friends with him anymore because I think he's just a bit of a... I think he's basically a, classic tyrannical director, but without any of the talent. So, if you're getting drilled by Stanley Kubrick, you probably will just Suck it up. Like, I'm working with Stanley
grit and bear
Kubrick.
it.
Yeah, but when you're getting shouted at by fucking Michael Bay, you're like, it's not worth it.
Transformers 4 or something.
Absolutely. Mark Wahlberg might like that kind of thing, but that's another story.
Oh, great. Michael, you're going to be shouting at me, yeah?
Yeah. Great, because I love pain and I love gain. So this is like you're my perfect director, and this is my perfect movie.
Yeah, it's a good match of star and director because they're both quite ugly in their being.
Hey, Michael, say hi to your mother for me. Hey, Michael, say hi to your mother for me.
And that's how we're imagining they're both tall.
Yeah, exactly. Anywho, I think there were some opinions said there.
Yeah.
And you guys can decide whether to agree. But anyway, so let's go to Chippendales. What are your thoughts and score?
Welcome to Chippendales was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but it justified its existence, which is something true crime retellings have to kind of fight against. And it was entertaining, it was slick, the acting was good, not perfect for the reasons mentioned. So I'll give it a solid 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I would agree. I think it should have been a bit shorter, maybe. Could have been a bit tighter in places, but not in the costumes. Wink, wink. But well acted and easy watch, bit of popcorn. So yeah, I would give it a 7 as well. And Pain and Gain.
Oh, it's just awful, ugly, nasty, black in its soul. Misogynist, homophobic, racist, all the things that we come to expect with just the weirdest filmmaking instincts from a man who it just has the grossest sensibilities. So a 1 out of 10.
I agree with you on everything you said. I thought Ed Helms was okay. I thought The Rock Ed Harris, sorry. I think The Rock was okay. I thought Anthony Mackie was okay in points. Is there anything else I thought was okay? I'm going to give it a scrape 2, but then there's another part of me that's like, just from the pure hatred of how misogynistic everything is, wants to give me a 0.
Yeah.
But I'm just for The Rock, I'm going to give it a 2.
Okay.
But so this is a question I think is worth asking. So we have one other film that we found repugnant and repellent that we've watched on this before, which was Blonde. Do you hate this or Blonde more?
I think Blonde, because Blonde has these... I think maybe somewhere in the script level there's some idea that this is a satire, but, it portrays itself quite a lot for a shit joke or a piss joke or whatever it might be. So it's not really a satire. It's just when the director will come to defend this, they'll say, oh, it's a satire. Whereas Blonde really does believe that it's telling the big, important story about sexual violence in Hollywood. He really, really believes it. He really believes it with his whole soul. And just for that kind of contradiction, I hate Blonde more. This I can dismiss.
I know it is technically true crime, but they're not people that anyone really knows who's going to meet in the street, and a lot of them are kind of amalgamations of characters as well. The main two, Anthony Mackie's character and Mark Wahlberg's character, kind of existed, but like The Rock's character is an amalgamation of people.
Combination of about 4 people.
Yeah, and stuff. And, so it doesn't feel as real life, whereas Blonde is exploiting one person in my mind.
Yes.
And that's, I think, where I felt this is just awful shite and is not a very nice movie. And, the same kind of people who would watch it and really like it are the same kind of people who like Andrew Tate. It's got that kind of like...
Oh, yeah, very much so. That's a good comparison.
That kind of vibe about it. So it's pretty awful from that point of view. So I don't think it's harmless, but I think Blonde is exploitative in the extreme, and that's why I think I gave Blonde a 0, didn't I, or whatever?
Yeah, so, I think we did.
So yeah, in a way I hated that more, but this just wasn't entertaining in any way, and just how if it wasn't as sexist and repugnant as it is, maybe I would have given it a 4 for trying some things and doing some stuff, but that makes me really bring it down because it makes me you feel a bit dirty after watching it.
Oh yeah, there's a whole ickiness to this whole thing, from the photography, which is always showing just how sweaty they are and greasy, to
And how often they're topless as well.
and topless, to the gross humour.
Yeah.
Everything about it just makes you kind of want to scrub yourself.
Yeah, it is pretty disgusting. But anyway, on that cheery note, so yeah, if you want some easy popcorn watching, have a look at Chippendales. Which is weird to say about a true crime thing, but the crime doesn't feel that it's only quite a small part of it, really.
Yeah, really only the last few episodes.
Yeah. But yeah, whereas don't watch Pain and Gain, you have been warned.
Do not watch it.
Goodbye.
Bye.